Thank you, Madam Chair. All right, Mr. Montez, you opened the door to the 15th and redistricting. I think you've stumbled on to a key question here when we try to understand the policy points, and that is you are attempting to merge statistical analysis with inferring the intent of voters. This seems to be an extremely difficult proposition. Yes, you can present statistics on how groups vote, but can you really use that to deduce what is in their minds and their hearts about how they want to vote for one candidate or another? It seems to me this was the flaw in the attempt to resolve the 15th district's redistricting. And I think I'm right for this reason, and I want to know if you agree. What resulted in the elections in the 15th legislative district would seem to run against the premise that certain groups were being suppressed or their votes diluted or otherwise affected previously. It seems to me that the results of the redrawn map of the 15th imply that the premise that you can statistically deduce a person's mind for how they want to vote is false. Do you agree?
So I think there's something very true about what you're saying, Representative Walsh, which is statistics are never going to give you what you would get if you sat down and had a conversation with someone. And I think the example of the 15th is good in the sense that what the Voting Rights Act guarantees is the fair opportunity to elect. It doesn't guarantee that you get to elect anybody. So to give you a specific that I am very, very familiar with, because I didn't litigate the 15th legislative district, I don't know about the ins and outs of that one. But I will tell you that in Sunnyside, the example of Sandra Cesate is a really good one. If you had a fair voting system in Sunnyside, it is just plainly true that in the districts that would have elected her, she would have gotten 67% of the vote. It's just plainly true. And what that reflects about voters' intents, any of those things, is sort of besides the point when you're trying to convince a judge that if you had a fair system, this group of people would have chosen this candidate, and because the system is not fair, they can't choose that candidate. And so to that extent, I think, yes, statistics can tell you what the voters' intent was to the extent that they would have picked a different candidate, and had the system been fair, they would have been able to pick that candidate. That there is then an election and a different candidate wins because that candidate, lots of things go into that, right? So one of the Voting Rights Act elements is that candidates aren't serving the communities. In other words, communities consistently come with issues to the candidates, and the candidates just ignore them because they don't have to address those issues because they don't have any real chance of being unseated. Once those voters have a legitimate say in what they're doing, maybe the candidate is going back to them and saying, and really trying to address their needs in a way that they weren't before, right? There's so many complications that go into that. But it's actually in a lot of cases quite easy to show that in a different voting system that was more fair, that voters would have elected a different candidate. I hope I answered your question.